There seems to be no end in sight to the geopolitical tensions and ideological differences between South Africa and the US. Now, the latest is in relation to the United States Department of Human Rights report alleging that South Africa's human rights record has, and I quote, significantly worsened. The report claims that there are several instances of arbitrary and unlawful killings committed by the government or its agents. Pretoria has since refuted these claims, describing them as flawed and biased. Spokesperson for the Department of International Relations and Cooperation, Chrispin Phiri, joins us now for more reaction. Chrispin, good evening to you and thank you so much for your time. I was reading that report, and it's very clear when you go through it that whoever was compiling it has taken different pieces of information from different statements, different reports, and it really doesn't speak in some instances even to the nuances that could be behind the stories.
Absolutely. I mean, for example, one of the stories that are lifted there is the very tragic story of two farm workers who were killed in Limpopo by a farmer and then subsequently fed to pigs. And this report by the US, a very sophisticated country, cites this as an extrajudicial killing. Now, our viewers at home may be wondering, what is an extrajudicial killing? An extrajudicial killing is when a state official, normally from the law enforcement, killed someone and without the relevant authority in terms of Section 49 of the Criminal Procedure Act. And that is then deemed to be an extrajudicial killing. And that is subsequently investigated by a body like IPID, and such an individual is liable for prosecution. So to label an incident of crime between two citizens as an extrajudicial killing really tells you the quality of the report itself. And that's why we said that we are deeply concerned about this matter. But also, there are some instances where it claims that journalists are being targeted. Now, sure, South Africa is a very robust country, Ms. Zwane. Sometimes we don't agree with how journalists frame issues. But to say that journalists are deliberately being targeted is very far from the truth. And, you know, quite frankly, one of the things that we wouldn't have said, but we are now compelled to say, is that South Africa can actually point to an example where a South African national was killed by law enforcement agencies in the US. But we said we respect the system, the judicial system of the US, and we will follow whatever ruling they come up with. We expect the same courtesy where there are issues with how our own nationals are arraigned by law enforcement agencies, and quite frankly, by any matter that is before the courts. We expect that, the judicial system in South Africa will be respected. So all of the issues that have been highlighted in the report are issues that have been flagged by the South African Human Rights Council, or where there are adequate recommendations in place for law enforcement agencies to reform and deal with some of these issues. But the US report doesn't take that into consideration at all.
It's one thing to expect this courtesy, right? It's another to get it. Do you think you ever will?
Well, we must point out that at this current juncture, this is also an administration that has pulled out of the Human Rights Council of the UN. So it is quite clear that their perception of human rights is not something that is globally accepted. And that's something that we'll have to now realign and understand. But we will always subject ourselves to the United Nations Human Rights Council, and we don't believe that a unilateral decision about what constitutes human rights in one country and in another is something that we are bound by.
And Chrispin, when really this is a lengthy report, and it makes for interesting reading, because it's quite, it boggles the mind, especially with that pig farm story, as to how they reached that particular conclusion given the developments in that courtroom. But one would ask, right, because it also touches on farm murders, it touches on journalists, it touches on even workers' rights, looking at some of the unions in the country. You as officials have been to the White House, had meetings with White House officials, including the US president. But still, it seems that these particular issues continue to persist. Do you think some of what has been said, even by those who could have left the country at one instance or another and had audience with the US, could have also contributed to some of what we're seeing again today?
Well, we've said this repeatedly, that the language that is adopted by the US administration does echo some of the policy positions of non-state actors in South Africa and political parties for that matter. So that the jury is out there, that is quite evident. But one of the things that I think we can take a little bit of solace from is the fact that this report doesn't make the claim that there's a white genocide in South Africa. And that is perhaps a positive step. Perhaps that is a direct outcome of the engagement of President Ramaphosa and President Trump. But the fact that it still goes on to distort a number of publicly available information. And I also hope, Ms. Wanya, that you will be able to bring the South African Human Rights Commission on your platform, or an independent body, maybe not governmental, like Human Rights Watch, so that they can give a third-party perspective on this report. We really are seeing a complete mischaracterization of South Africa's constitutional framework. And we will continue to take exception to this, because even though we're a 30-year-old democracy, we believe that we fought for this democracy. We believe in democracy, and we believe in human rights. And to be accused of violating human rights in South Africa in a flagrant manner that the US State Department has done really, really is concerning.
Yeah, and reading your statement earlier, you speak about the fact that you'll be putting out your own information of the public domain. But before I let you go, Chrispin, there is another issue that one read this afternoon. It's reports that are attributing certain remarks to the SANDF's General Rudzani Maphanya following his trip to Iran. And he says in this particular article in The Citizen, and I quote, "This trip is not only a military one, but has a political message and was carried out at the best possible time to express our heartfelt feelings to the peace-loving nation of Iran." And of course, it continues with more other, remarks there. What is the reaction of DIRCO to this?
Yes, we have issued a statement to say that, look, in the foreign policy regime of South Africa, the foreign policy is implemented by the president as well as the Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Foreign Relations Minister Ronald Lamola, that's DIRCO now. And any state actor or that goes to a government and purports to represent the government on foreign policy, that should not be construed as the foreign policy of the country. Minister Lamola has had further engagements with some of his counterparts, but we will be seeking proper clarity on what has transpired here. But we can, without any evocation, say that the positions and the statements attributed to the general do not represent our foreign policy positions.
Chrispin, appreciate your time this evening. Thank you so much for chatting to us. That was the spokesperson for the Department of International Relations and Cooperation, Chrispin Phiri.